everybody, and welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavita. I will be your host for today's presentation, and we're going to be discussing the World Cup in the United States. And the thing is, its implications financially for the United States, the reputation of the World Cup in the United States, and also we're going to be discussing whether or not the federal government benefited, or was this mainly state and local governments. The other thing we're looking at, of course, is Social Security again, because it looks like Congress is taking a look now, finally, at Social Security. And it seems to me they actually have the issues on the table to resolve the Social Security crisis, which include lifting the cap, taxing interest and dividends, okay, and or passive income, basically, or a combination thereof, etc. The only question is, as they say in Mr. Wonderful says all the time in Shark Tank, what are you going to do about Social Security? Also extending the retirement age. Those are, I think, are the three big issues in fixing Social Security. But with that, we have today, of course, the star of the show, the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, who gets the honorable mention of having to address all these issues, and we'll bring him in and see what his comments are. So there's an exciting day in the U.S. It looks like Congress is, not Congress, but a group of them are convening to solve the Social Security problem. And I think they actually have the issues before them. I read through them and I thought, oh, they're actually addressing the solutions. The only question is, are they going to do anything about it? And then, of course, we have the World Cup in the United States, and that's big, at least here in Europe. I mean, it's everything's about the World Cup in America. And is that a big economic boom to the United States? So that's going to be very interesting. Anyway, we'll see what you have to say about all that, David. It's pretty interesting times we live in.
We'll start with the World Cup. Prior to this current World Cup, the all-time record for attendance for a World Cup was the 1994 World Cup in the United States. Obviously, the World Cup is still ongoing, but the current World Cup in 2026 has already beaten the record of the 1994 World Cup. So we're setting new records with regard to attendance. Clearly, there is an economic impact with regard to the localities that are hosting games. And in some cases, beyond those localities that are hosting games. For example, in the United States, a lot of people are visiting Washington, D.C. on this, our 250th anniversary year of the Declaration of Independence. And so there are some cities that aren't hosting games that are still benefiting from the World Cup because of visitation. Most of the economic benefit will inure to states and localities because the most immediate impact is through sales taxes and occupancy taxes. And those are at the state and local level. At the same point in time, to the extent that, corporations and other businesses that are taxed at the individual level make more money, then ultimately states and the federal government can make more money because of the increased profits associated. But you really have to also look at a total economic analysis. I mean, the fact is, yes, we're getting more revenues now, but there were significant expenditures that were made by federal, state, and local governments in connection with operating the games, security at the federal and state level, infrastructure improvements with regard to the state and local level being two examples. But to me, one of the most notable things about these games, in the United States, we call it soccer. It's called football internationally. We have American football, which is very different. But, soccer or world football, which is what the FIFA games are all about, the World Cup, is gaining popularity in the United States, both at the amateur level as well as at the professional level. We have professional teams now in the United States, and the United States team is this year probably the most competitive team we've ever had, We're in the knockout round. We'll see what ends up happening from here. But, one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of people have come over here from other parts of the world to see their teams and to try to experience the United States, many of which have never been to the United States before. And the general reaction is extremely positive with regard to their experience here in the United States as to how friendly Americans have been in greeting them and interacting with them. Most of them have been hugely impressed with the abundance of food and the variety of the types of foods that we have here in the United States. I did hear that the Scots, and I'm 23% Scottish, according to genetic analysis, drank all the beer in many of the bars in Boston, so they obviously had a good time. But basically the experience has been overwhelmingly positive so far. But as far as the final economics, we'll have to wait until it's over to see what that is. But so far, very positive.
Okay, the other thing that we would like to address is Social Security. It looks
Sure.
like Congress is looking at it right now, and they have what I think the big three issues are: lifting the cap, and one commentator said that would solve about 48% of the problem. Then the other one is to extend the retirement age, and then the other thing is to incur the Social Security taxes on interest and dividends. So I think those are big three issues. But as Mr. Wonderful says on Shark Tank, okay, we got the issues. I went through them. I'm going, they went through all the stuff we've been going through for years here. But the key thing is, what are you going to do? Some, part, all, none? That's the question, David. What are they going to do in Congress about Social Security?
Well, first, we have several major financial and fiscal challenges. Social Security is clearly one. The Old Age Retirement and Survivors Income Trust Fund, which is the biggest for the Social Security program. The second one is the Disability Insurance Trust Fund. That is scheduled to run out in late 2032, absent a change in course. And if it runs out, there'll be a 22 to 28% cut in benefits, depending upon whether you go with the trustees or the Congressional Budget Office's numbers, immediately. That can't be allowed to happen. That it's clearly inequitable, it's politically infeasible, and it would have a serious adverse effect on the economy, 1 to 2% of GDP in most states. And so we can't let that happen. So the real question is, when are we going to address it and how are we going to address it? I'll come back to that. The second issue is Medicare. Medicare's Part A hospital insurance program trust fund is scheduled to run out in 2033. If that happens, there's immediate cut in provider payments of 11%. By the way, these numbers grow over time, the percentages. That's obviously not something that we should allow happen. And the third, and quite frankly, the much bigger problem is how are we going to get debt to GDP under control? Debt to GDP is already too high. It's projected to go much, much higher over the next 30 years. And so, we need to figure out what are we going to do and how to get it done. There are pieces of legislation on the Hill, some of which are bipartisan, to address these issues. For example, there's the Fiscal Commission Act, which proposes to set up a statutory commission that would address Social Security and the broader issue. There are some bills that are focused just on Social Security, to form a commission to just do Social Security. There are some bills that propose just to reform Social Security without a commission. I don't think that's likely to be feasible. I do think that we're going to have a commission in order to get it done. My personal view, I'd rather have one commission that makes two sets of recommendations than have multiple commissions. I'd rather have one that has to make recommendations to assure the solvency, sustainability of Social Security standing alone. That would consider not just the actuarial balance over 75 years, but where do we stand at the end of 75 years, which was not adequately considered the last time we reformed Social Security in 1983, needs to be considered this time. And then a second set of recommendations that would get debt held by the public to GDP down, not up, down to 90% from the current 100% level by 2040. The current projections are that it will go to 175% by 2056 if we don't change course. We'll have a debt crisis long before that, and quite frankly, could have a debt crisis before the 2032 date if we don't end up demonstrate to the markets and to our investors in particular that we're going to start taking steps to put our finances in order. I will note, Nick, that my next book, which I'm sending in comments on the editor's comments today, the tentative title of it is Saving Social Security and America's Future, Common Sense Solutions. It's a wake-up call, a call to action, a way forward. It doesn't just talk about the problem, it talks about solutions. And importantly, a vast majority of the solutions that are contained in the book have received super majority support from representative groups of voters. The truth is, the politicians are out of touch with reality, and the people are ahead of the politicians. Our biggest deficit is a leadership deficit. We have too many laggards and not enough leaders in Washington.
Okay, I do have one solution that I keep harping on, but it's like you said, you can have a solution, but it goes nowhere because of political. It may not be politically feasible, and this addresses the national debt, and it's based on this metric. The metric is that the baby boomers, aka my generation, has 88 to 125 trillion in assets. Okay, so here's the solution. You basically bring back the federal estate tax, earmarked the funds to the national debt. And if you did so and you got rid of the federal, basically got rid of the unified credit, which right now has escalated to the point where if you're not having 30 million or more, you're not affected. Now, I first started law practice 42 years ago. I specialized in estate tax planning in Florida. I got out of it in 2001 when they eliminated the estate tax, and they jumped the unified. They actually eliminated it completely. Then they jumped it so high it was, why bother doing estate tax planning? There is none. In the meantime, a couple things happened. The rich got richer because, come on, basically when they don't have this tax, you could literally accumulate huge sums of money and never pay taxes. Seriously. And then on the other hand is that they said, well, it only collects a little bit. If you keep raising the unified credit, of course. But here's what you do. You drop it to zero. And working in the area, I worked at for 17 years. Let me tell you something. And I've been a beneficiary of an estate. I started my grandmother's estate in 1976 because she was subject to the estate tax. I said, we got to do planning, blah, blah, blah. All right. Here's the thing when you're a beneficiary. It's found money, David. In other words, it's like, okay, if me and my brothers and sisters had to pay an estate tax, we'd go, okay, because look at all the money we're getting for doing, frankly, nothing. There is some weird thing about it that for some reason that people who inherit money shouldn't have to pay any taxes. And they said, well, your parents paid it twice. No, they didn't because they're dead. Okay. The only person who didn't pay it was yours truly and my brothers and sisters. All right. So that's my anecdotal evidence that I'm going like, if we had to pay it, we had to pay it, shrug our shoulders and keep on going. Seriously. But this actually would solve the national debt problem over a period of a generation without having to, frankly, tax anybody except a dead person. And, it's almost like this. Do you want to solve the problem or not with the least possible pain? And this is, I hate to say it, this is the least possible pain. We have the whole system intact. They could do it overnight, and it would take a generation because you build up such a big national debt to get rid of it. Take a whole generation. But would it solve a lot of the problem? Yes, and it should be addressed as a solution because, and I worked with the wealthy people. I mean, and you know some because you work for Peterson, but one of my clients founded Coca-Cola. I mean, come on. Yeah, and then the thing is, they live a different life. That's all I can say. And then it is and if the beneficiaries had to pay something, they would just pay it. But anyway, let's move on, and yes, sir.
Let me respond.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that's covered in the new book is what we refer to as the 10 big lies in Washington. And I'll just mention two now that relate to taxes. One of which is all tax cuts stimulate the economy and all tax cuts pay for themselves. That is a lie. And we go on to elaborate on that. The second that relates to taxation is that the estate tax represents double taxation. It does not represent double taxation because, as you know, there are a number of things that are never taxed. For example, you get a step up in basis at death. In addition, the exemptions are so high. There's no question in my mind that part of the solution will be a modification of the estate tax. There's no question in my mind. Reasonable people can differ on exactly what to do and how to do it. There's also no question in my mind that putting our finances in order will require projected spending reductions and projected revenue increases, and that those need to be looked at as a percentage of GDP, not in dollars. That's the relevant metric. And I believe that all things considered, there's going to be a heavier weighting towards projected spending decreases than projected revenue increases. The public supported a 2-to-1 ratio of spending reductions to revenue increases, excluding interest. But if you end up getting more revenue and or less expense, you reduce interest. So the ratio is really more like 3-to-1 spending reduction to revenue increase. And you mentioned one thing that I think a lot of people don't mention: political feasibility. You have to pass the House, you have to pass the Senate, and unless it's budget reconciliation, it's subject to a filibuster. And by the way, Social Security reform is subject to a filibuster. It can't be done through budget reconciliation. And you've got to get a signature of the president. So you and I and anybody else can come up with a lot of great ideas about how we're going to solve this problem, whether it be Social Security standing alone or the broader fiscal challenge. But if you can't meet the political feasibility test, you're wasting your time. And I don't like wasting my time.
Right. And then that's the problem with the estate tax. But at one time when I was working in it, that we felt it would never go away because there was no national organization of heirs. We were actually shocked as a group, all the estate attorneys, that they passed to get rid of it. And when I told them, I'm out of here, I'm not going to do this anymore, they said, oh, they'll bring it back. They'll do a patch or do something. And you know what? They didn't. It was actually fully repealed in 2010. And so, like I said, I jumped into pensions, been there ever since. I liked doing estate planning. I thought it was good. And I can tell you from my experience, what happens is the money gets trapped in these older generations waiting to croak. And so the younger beneficiaries don't really benefit until they do die. And then the money flows down to so they can spend it or reinvest it, et cetera. In the meantime, it's all trapped upstairs. So to me, it would be an interesting solution.
And as you may know, there are a number of very wealthy people, billionaires in particular, which are growing day by day, that have made the pledge that they're going to give half of their net worth to charity. And you see a lot of wealthy people, including Pete Peterson, including Warren Buffett, and including Bill Gates, and I could go on, that have established foundations and put a lot of money in the foundations for charitable purposes. Some more worthwhile than others, some more effective than others.
Yeah. And one of the problems, because I used to set up private foundations because it's a great out for the estate tax. But one problem it has is you only need to distribute 5% of your net worth every year. So you can continue.
Correct.
Yeah, you can continue growing it. So like I said, I find it to be a very fascinating area. But like my one client convinced me, goes, he didn't want to do any planning. He had 20 million back then when he had to pay 10 million estate taxes. I go, I get 2 kids, each going to receive 5 million. Nick, what's wrong with that? That's a good start, isn't it? And what am I supposed to argue with him? No, 5 million is nothing. No, I didn't argue with him. I'm going, okay, I understand.
And if you want to talk about some likely Social Security reforms, we can do that too, because those are covered in the book as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the book, and we're also looking forward to our panel coming in right now, because I'm sure they're going to have some conversation regarding this. Kim Calhoun coming in from Raleigh, and of course Jatovi also coming in from the Raleigh-Durham area. So what are your thoughts regarding two things, Kim? The Social Security reform, which looks like they're going to try to do something, and also the World Cup. I don't know if it really hit the Raleigh-Durham area. And Europe, it's pretty exciting. They're like,
we've been too busy celebrating our big hockey game win. Hello, David. I'm looking forward to a copy of that book. I've got free time coming up, so I'm
I promised to send you
that's right,
on a confidential basis a draft of it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So when it's ready, let me know.
Okay.
But what you guys were discussing reminded me of Thomas Jefferson's 10 Laws for Life. And in there, he speaks on financial due diligence twice. One about not spending money that you don't have, be financial, responsible with your money. Don't spend money you don't have, and don't buy something just because it looks like it's a bargain and you think you have to have it. Buy things that you need, not things that you think you had to have because it was a bargain, because you're just not going to really care for it. And so when I reflect on his laws, I love going and reading about Thomas Jefferson. I don't know why, but I just do. And I look at the fact that, David, what you say is we've got laggards for leaders, and that none of them have been due diligent with the spending of our money. And now, Social Security is at risk, and that's something that I need, right? I'm using it with survivorship. And so, but we paid into it. And so to me, that's fraud of some kind, that, we paid in under good faith that it was going to be spent the way it needed to be spent. And, where did the money go? Can somebody show us? I don't see accountability anywhere, but to make somebody accountable, you also need to enforce whatever laws you have in place. So if they weren't accountable and they misused my funds, what do you do to them?
Well, first, Kim, as you know, I used to be a trustee of Social Security and Medicare from 1990 to 1995.
I am.
And I have been a longstanding advocate for being able to tell people the truth as to what these programs are and what they're not. Okay. First, Social Security is an insurance program. It is not just a retirement program. It provides for retirement income. It provides for survivors benefits, as you know, and it provides for disability benefits, and they're all insurance programs. It's a pay-as-you-go system, okay? It's not advance funded. To the extent that there were excess funds that were received in any given year, the government, rightly or wrongly, spent those funds on other things and replaced those surplus funds with a government bond, non-readily marketable, guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, including the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And for years we had surpluses, and the so-called trust fund built up with these bonds. Okay. And I say trust fund, and I put quote around it, because they're not real trust funds. They're really sub-accounts of the general ledger. And in my view, they need to be treated like trust funds. They need to be treated as separate and distinct legal entities with fiduciary responsibility and liability. So what ended up happening is, when we went from surpluses on an annual basis to deficits, then the government had to cash in those bonds. And to the extent that the government was running deficits, it had to go out and borrow that money, the so-called debt held by the public. But now we're in danger of cashing out all the bonds by the end of 2032. And when that happens, the difference between the revenues and the payments at that time is a 22 to 28% gap. And by law, the law says you can only pay benefits out of trust fund assets, which means you have to cut the benefits immediately 22 to 28% across the board. That's not going to happen, but when are we going to do something about it? And that's why I'm happy to get into what are some of the things that I think are more likely than not to happen based upon all the work that I've done, over the years that have gotten broad-based public support.
Okay. Well,
It's
David, what
a
are
bit
some of the
scary.
things?
It really is. And I don't know why they're allowed to just go crazy with everything and do whatever they want without any accountability at this point. So many people rely on these things. So many people rely on just to be able to survive right now. I hate saying it, but food stamps, and thank God we have them, or SNAP, or whatever the program is. But you've got all of this, and now they're saying, no, we're just going to take it away. But I paid into this. I would have rather had taken my money and paid into an investment program and then known I was secure for the rest of my life. That is money I could have put into something else for over all the years that my husband and I paid into, and received a better benefit at the end of the day from it. But you can't, I understood it and respected it because other people needed it. And we need to get back to that, David. I don't know how we do that. Maybe you do, but we need to do it. All the people need to get together and we need to demand it. We need to say this needs to get back to where it's under control.
Several things. One, Social Security is the most popular federal program by far. Okay. There's almost 70 million people on the program now. Within the next 10 years, there's going to be at about 80 million people under the program. One of the reasons that we're leading the book with Social Security is because of that fact, because there are so many people that are affected by it and because it's approaching insolvency over the next several years. Some of the things that I think are likely to happen with regard to Social Security are along the following lines based upon my experience over the years and based upon what the public feedback I've gotten is. First, to significantly raise the taxable wage-based cap. It was basically doubled in '83. I can see it being doubled again, which would mean that people that make anywhere from like 180,000 to 360,000 would be affected by that. But if you don't make that much money, you're not going to be affected by it. I don't think they'll eliminate the cap as they did for Medicare, because the Medicare taxes are 1.45% for the individual and the employer. Social Security is 6.2%. There's a big difference. You have to keep in mind this. While we need to ensure the solvency, sustainable, and security of Social Security, we got a much bigger financial challenge. And so we're going to need more revenues for that bigger financial challenge than Social Security. We're going to need more revenues for Social Security, but the bigger challenge is healthcare, our tax system, and things of that nature. All right. So the first is to significantly raise the taxable wage-based cap, to try not to raise the rate, okay, because it's very regressive. It applies on the first dollar of wages, if you will. But if it is raised, consideration to be given to raising it for the employer, but not for the individual. Now, that ultimately will have some impact over time because that's part of compensation, right? And so but it won't have an immediate impact with regard to wages, if you will. And the individuals won't feel it immediately as they would if you ended up raising the payroll tax rate immediately. Secondly, to gradually increase the normal retirement age, probably 2 years over 24 years, 1 month a year over 24 years. Okay. Thirdly, to change the benefit formula to provide a somewhat higher replacement rate for people at or below the poverty level. and a lower replacement rate for upper middle income and upper income individuals, but don't turn it into a welfare program by saying that at some point you get nothing, even though you paid into it for years. By the way, wealthy people don't have to take it. I mean, you don't have to, you got to apply to take it. So if wealthy people don't need it and don't want to take it, don't apply for it. I know my co-author for my next book is very wealthy, and he gives all of his Social Security benefits to charity. And he doesn't need it himself. I mean, his other alternative is just don't take it. And that way that can help to reduce our financial challenge, if you will. I also think that we need to think about having an automatic savings account, for people that don't have an employer-sponsored plan. We still have a lot of people that don't. Social Security was never intended to be the sole form of retirement income. Too many people rely on it as their primary or sole source of retirement income. It was never intended to be that. And we need to get our savings rate up. So that's another issue. Once we start building the surplus again, then to provide more flexibility in how that's invested, subject to fiduciary responsibility and liability. Right now, under current law, you can only invest in U.S. government bonds or bonds that are backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Okay. And so, those are a few of the things that I think are likely to be considered as we go forward. And
Hey, just really quickly, I had a quick question for you.
Mark, let me finish.
Yeah.
Here's my biggest frustration. Social Security is the easiest problem to solve. Why? Because young people don't think they're going to get it. They're wrong. They are going to get it. Maybe at a different age and a little bit different amount, but they're going to get it. All right. Seniors think their benefits are going to get cut. No, they're not. Okay. If you're in payment status or close to retirement, your benefits aren't going to get cut. There may be a reduction in the rate of increase, but you're not going to get cut. All right. And so that means that you can exceed the expectations of every generation of Americans if you do make some of the changes I talk about, phase them in over time. That's a win. I mean, and if we had leadership, we'd have been done during Clinton. By the way, I worked with Clinton, AARP, and the Concord Coalition to do reform in the late 90s, and it would have happened but for the Monica Lewinsky incident. I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead, buddy.
No problem.
Wow.
One, I was glad that you mentioned the World Cup because we're actually going to have a World Cup like event in 2029, I believe it is, and that's the World University Games. So we'll be seeing some of that economic impact when a lot of young athletes come here to the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area and everything like that. So there's already people, including my cultural arts center, that are putting in bids to be host sites and all along those lines. But my question is actually around another part of the government that is going to be having a major change on July 1st. And I'd love to hear your thoughts around this because a lot of folks, even those in the middle age range or even some that might be elderly, have gotten that whole notion of student loans. And there's supposed to be a major change to those student loans beginning July 1st. Ironically, that's my birth date and everything. But they're saying that millions of borrowers must pick a new repayment plan and some will face tighter borrowing caps and higher repayment. So they're saying bye to the SAVE plan. So I just wanted your thoughts about this change in the student loans, because that has been another part, in addition to Social Security, that has impacted a lot of folks, particularly a lot of young folks, because a lot of young folks depend on that money to go to college and to and then they have to face the repayment when they get out into the working world. And like I've said before, my oldest nephew just graduated high school and now he'll go off to college, and after 4 or 5 years, actually he wants to go to law school, Nick, so maybe after 8 or 10 years he'll have to deal with the whole notion of the repayments and everything like that. But Dave, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this SAVE plan and it going bye-bye, and also some of these repayment ideas that they're talking about that will impact our young people.
Well, first, I don't know all the details about what the proposed change is on July 1. I'll have to study that. But let me just give you some comments about student loans. Believe it or not, the largest asset, on the balance sheet of the United States federal government is student loans.
Mm-hmm.
Over $1.5 trillion. Okay. That program needs to be fundamentally revised in ways that are designed to promote the economic needs of the United States. And that program also needs to be revised in order to recognize that not everybody is bound for college.
Right.
Not all colleges are equal.
Right.
Not all degrees are equal. And that in addition to occupations that might require a college degree, and by the way, there are a number of billionaires that don't have a college degree, okay, that we need to be promoting the trades as many other countries do, including Germany, and that loans should be available to people who want to pursue the trades. To me, the real tragedy today is you have a lot of people that go to college, may or may not be a good college. They get a degree, may or may not be a marketable degree, and then they're saddled with a tremendous amount of debt and can't get a job that can adequately service the debt that they have. Okay. And I think this is where I think parents have to come in and play a much bigger role in trying to help counsel with their kids about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. In my case, I was able to pay for my college. My dad paid for my college. I mean, and I deem that an obligation to do that, okay, to set them on their way. But not everybody can do that, okay? And so I think, we need a much more comprehensive restructuring of the student loan program. And I think we have to provide reasonable limits on how much people are expected to pay back in a given year, as well.
So a couple other dimensions to that.
Yeah.
One, it's been politicized where it's been, there's some rhetoric that helping kids with student loans is helping the elites. Two, with AI disrupting everything, the college degree benefit that people used to have, that if you went to work with a college degree versus having just a high school diploma, you might be earning tens of thousands of dollars more on average. That's been eroded by disruption. And three, college enrollment now is 60-40 women. Men are getting left behind. You got to figure out what to do about the men.
Yeah, no, I know. And, demographics have changed dramatically. I remember when I was in college and taking accounting, there were very few women in accounting, but now a majority of the graduates are women. Okay, and a significant majority of the top graduates are women. By the way, if you're gonna, Mark, if you're gonna host those games in Raleigh, make sure you got plenty of beer, because
I know that's right.
and for Boston to run out of beer, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal to run out of beer and everything like that. I'm just curious because I did see that Amazon stock went up, and I know Sasha, if he was here, could talk about this from an investment standpoint, but you can talk about it from an economic standpoint. I was just curious whether anybody here on the panel, including you, Dave, had gone out and done those Amazon Prime deals. I know I didn't do any this year. I've done them in the past, but they did say that Amazon stock shot up big time and that was a major economic indicator in terms of positivity. And I know Jeff Bezos is probably very happy.
There's a huge emphasis on getting enough protein in your diet now, particularly if you're an old man. And so I bought a bunch of old man protein on Amazon during Prime days.
Before we get off on that tangent, I wanted to get back to the college thing because I think Dave hit on something that really is perfect, and I would love for a solution or an ideas around solutions. Because yes, not trying to get on the political tangent either, because that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But the big thing is, I think, Dave, you pointed out that there are so many issues around student loans and the parent issue, because as parents, we want our kids to be successful and we try and choose them the right college, but we can't predict the future as well. And predicting the future and trying to coax them into, hey, choose this instead of that, we don't know in 5 years or in 4 years what that is going to be. So I think the interjection or the actual solution needs to come through after that, because as pointed out right now, AI is taking away a lot of jobs. It hit, I think, 90,000 this year already. And it's really destroying the tech industry. It's destroying the gaming industry. Well, it's into the gaming industry, into the creative market. And that's really harming a lot of that creative side of things. So when you look at coders, when you look at social media coordinators, when you look at graphics designers, and even down that arena, which used to be a great job to have, is now a very dangerous job to carry because of the fact that AI is coming and AI is here. So where can we fix, or what kind of solution can we create, or any ideas around a solution after the kid is already chosen and after the kid comes out of college? Because that's where I think the major student loan is. The major student loan problem is because you have doctors and nurses that come out of college with hundreds of $1,000s of debt, and you can't get into nursing. So now you go into bag groceries, and now you're already in the hole on your student loans because you can't pay those back. Going bag groceries and even working at the gym at the same time, doing multiple jobs, you can't pay that student loan back. You're never going to. Teachers come out saddled with. So where does that solution come? Not during the choice, because that's going to be something different. I think the big solution has to come at the end.
Well,
What is there?
I agree with part of what you said, but not all of what you said. First, I think first you look at, demographics or destiny. Okay. And we know pretty much what some of the demographic trends are. Okay. The aging of society, longer lifespans, lower birth rates, higher dependency ratios. And that's going to affect certain industries. Okay. There's no question about that. So you have to consider macro trends. Secondly, industries. All right. We know that there are certain industries that are likely to be more vibrant than others. Healthcare, for example. All right. In part because of the demographics, but not solely because of the demographics. You mentioned about nursing. My daughter-in-law is a nurse. One of my granddaughters is a nurse. They have no problem getting a job. They could get a job anywhere. And in fact, one of the problems in nursing right now is I have a niece who wants to become a nurse, and she's almost a straight A student, but she's having difficulty getting into a nursing program because they're full, because we don't have enough capacity, because the demand for nursing far exceeds the supply. So that's one. Thirdly, I think you have to think about macro trends. You have to think about industries. You have to then think about occupations. Okay. And then you have to think about what's your role within the occupation. In my view, for AI is going to be positive and negative. It's going to be positive for productivity. It's going to be positive for research and analysis, but it's going to be negative for people that are in jobs that don't require emotional intelligence. Okay, because that's one thing that AI can't do. It can't do emotional intelligence. Okay, it doesn't have, the human interaction, if you will, that's necessary, for example, to close a sale. Which is something that's important. But what I get concerned about, Jacoby, is we've got tremendous needs for the trades, and yet we're not promoting the trades. We're not subsidizing people's opportunity to be able to go into those trades. My son-in-law is the chief electrician for the Marine Corps Museum. He makes a good living. He makes good money. He's going to have good retirement benefits. He's in a union. He's going to be fine, right? He didn't graduate from college. In fact, I don't even think he went to college. Okay, he went to trade school and is doing just fine. And the other thing is that I do think, you have to think carefully about what kind of degree are they getting. because if you get a liberal arts degree, you're probably going to have to get a master's in something that's marketable in order to be able to get a decent job and service your student loans if you have them. That's just the way it is.
Well, I think the question though is those student loans, how do we create a solution to help those individuals? Because I mean, yes, we've got the macro, the micro, all that is there. And I understand that piece. But what I'm saying is, for example, that even as you point out, when you pointed out the nurse, because the individuals trying to get into nursing school coming out, yeah, there's going to be an ease because, you know, I think we all have individuals that are in the nursing field or touch base on the nursing field. But I think what I'm saying, like, for example, the assisted living area, right now they're sending back the whole deportation with the Haitian individuals. They were filling holes in the assisted living area. Now we have holes there, but are we going to be able to fill those gaps? And then if we aren't able to fill those gaps with actual individuals, because those assisted living areas aren't actual government run facilities, there are private industries that are running our medical facilities. And these medical facilities also have budgets and boards to deal with. And so those individuals getting fired in that situation or not liking their pay and want to move on, but they move on to something different. Go ahead. So essentially, how do we create a solution that makes it easier for kids to be able to pay back these student loans instead of being strapped with so much debt that they can't?
Well, first, the federal government has no plan. It has no plan overall dealing with, you know, economic, national security, foreign relations, domestic, no plan. So we need a plan, okay? A big subset of that is what I would call the human capital strategy. The most valuable asset this country has is its people, all right? And so therefore we need to be able to design a strategy that maximizes economic growth, that maximizes individual opportunity, and that recognizes some of the gaps that we have that need to be filled and some of the burdens that we have that exist that need to be relieved. Let's take an example of the Haitians. The Supreme Court ruled that temporary status means temporary, which means that the president, if he wants, can deport the Haitians. Would that be smart to deport all of them, including ones that are employed, that are self-sufficient, that are meeting needs of the society? No, that would make no sense. Okay. One of the things that we have to recognize, we have to develop a human capital strategy that considers things like education, immigration, labor laws, tax policies, etc. Okay. And we also need to differentiate between citizenship, permanent legal status, temporary legal status. Those things all have to be done. They have to be done in an integrated fashion. I advocate for that in the new book. Okay. But you got to have a plan. We have no plan. You know, I mean, when you don't.
Yeah, I completely agree with the no plan. But I was just thinking that we could. I mean, we're five guys sitting here. Let's create a plan. Let's see if we can create a solution.
All right, hold on. All right, let's. Here's what AI has to say about the Haitian immigrants. What I have to say is trying to get rid of them is largely racist. That Haitian immigrants have a higher employment rate than both native-born Americans and the overall foreign-born population. If you look at Haitians, they're mostly working their asses off.
Also, if you've ever been to Haiti, you know why. They don't want
to go back to Haiti.
Right. Okay. So, so another thing is, as we've discussed many times, we're only making 80% as many babies as we need to replace the population. U.S. population growth is at its lowest point in U.S. history, maybe less than 0.25% growth in population. So it's not like we're being overwhelmed and the country is exploding with immigrants.
Well, let me come back to what I said. you need to have a plan and a strategy, and deporting all of the Haitian immigrants makes no sense. Okay. But then again, what's their status going to be? I mean, one of the things that I talk about in the book is there's 3 tracks. Okay. There's a track to citizenship, which would have a very high bar. All right. And I won't go into the details. There's a track to permanent legal status, which means you can stay here indefinitely, but you don't get to vote because you're not a citizen. Okay. And then there's temporary legal status, which we ought to be much more generous about, to be able to meet economic needs, which in some cases may be seasonal or may be temporary rather than long-term needs, if you will. And in my view, I mean, the Haitian situation provides an opportunity to start experimenting with this. I mean, to what extent do you have people that have temporary legal status that you want to extend that if they're gainfully employed, if they're self-sufficient, if they're English proficient? I mean, just.
Hey, David, last Monday,
Yeah. Go ahead.
reason I wasn't on the show last week and everything like that is because I actually had the pleasure of speaking to a bunch of Haitians that are actually from Florida. Because as y'all know, I work at a cultural arts center. That cultural arts center was actually having Haitians visit because Haiti, which is a cultural arts center, is actually influenced by the revolution of the country of Haiti when it was being getting off the shackles of colonialism, and that's a whole nother conversation and everything along those lines. But yeah, these folks were a planter church from Plantation, Florida. I think they said they had originally been in Fort Lauderdale, and I don't know their status. I mean, I just know that they were there to visit me and everything like that. But they looked like they were gainfully employed, but I don't know that for a fact. So that's the question: is how will we be able to find out what's going on? Because, like I said, they are part of a planter church, and there are a number of planter churches around the country, and they seem like a very successful church. I mean, they were successful enough to be able to bring 50 of their congregations of various ages to my cultural arts center. Well, not mine, but the cultural arts center that I work at, and all along those lines. So my point is that you don't always know who these people are and whether they are legal or not.
Well, here's the big deal. With regard to the Haitians, Obama provided temporary legal status. Biden extended the temporary legal status. All right. Trump has been given the right to end that temporary legal status. Hopefully, what will happen is they'll do something intelligent, which is different from what normally gets done in Washington, no matter who's in charge. And hopefully what they'll do is, rather than saying that all these people are no longer legal residents, and by the way, under federal law, you're not supposed to hire an illegal immigrant. All right. The problem is they don't enforce the law.
Right.
And the other problem is that a lot of the people who are illegal immigrants who are working are paid in cash. And so therefore it's an underground economy. But here's what's important about the Haitians. They are still legal unless and until the president does something. And I hope that what the president will do is he'll do something intelligent to say something like, all right, we're going to extend your temporary legal status if you're gainfully employed, you don't have a criminal record. In other words, let's give a few criteria rather than saying everybody's out of here. Okay, that would make no sense.
Sadly, though, Dave, I believe the latter is what he'll do.
I hope we'll see.
And I'm with you. I hope not, but sadly, from the way he's trending, that's just the way it's going to be. On a different note, which I don't know, Nick, if you were about to go there, which I'm curious about your opinions on, Dave, is the whole ruling from the Supreme Court about the FTC that Trump can fire whom he wants to and hire who he wants to. That makes the FTC a political appointed group now. So how do you think that'll affect things?
Well, there were several rulings that came down today. One of the rulings dealt with the FTC, which gave Trump the right to remove an FTC commissioner
Right.
And the theory, I'm not a lawyer, but I know a fair amount about the Constitution. Okay, and the theory is the Constitution does not create a hybrid branch of government. You're either in the executive branch, you're in the legislative branch, or in the judicial branch. And to the extent that the Congress has created something that is supposed to be in the executive branch, then the head of the executive branch is the president of the United States. And therefore, the president needs to have the ability to control who's running these agencies. Notably, the court did not grant the president the right to automatically remove the Federal Reserve governor, because the Federal Reserve governor, they're supposed to be really not part of the executive branch. They're supposed to be a truly independent entity dealing with monetary policy. Plus, in the case of that person, they've been alleged to have engaged in mortgage fraud, but they haven't been adjudicated. They may or may not be deemed to be guilty of that. And the court's basically saying people have the right to due process, and therefore, unless and until that happens, we don't even want to get at the issue.
Yeah, I want to give
my
you
question was-
three
my
ideas
question-
from
Nick, you're a lawyer, aren't you?
yeah, basically. But I want to give you three ideas from Europe for a future book, David. That some of them look pretty good. I'll give you idea number one. It started in Norway. They have a sovereign wealth fund where they get a percentage of the assets of the oil companies. Today, every person in Norway has a value of about 400,000 because of that sovereign wealth fund. Number two that they're doing here in Spain, $100,000 for a startup, you can write it off. So that this way, it's not an opportunity zone, which they have in the US, but it's to encourage startups. They want Spain to be the startup capital of the world. So they have big conferences in Barcelona, and investors are encouraged to put 100,000 and write it off as long as it's a startup. And the third one they're doing in Spain, and this is the one I didn't like, okay, 10% on real estate tax purchases. So if you come over here, you want to buy a house, whatever the value of the house is, 10% will go to the government. And it's a way for them to collect revenue. I mean, there's no question about it, but I didn't see any real benefit other than them collecting revenue. But the other two I see benefits from. I see benefits for the startup community. This could solve some of what Jatovi said, the people coming out that could start up companies in their area. And the other one is the sovereign wealth fund. They could do that with the IPOs, the billionaires. It doesn't cost them anything. It costs them stock, but it doesn't cost them any cash. As long as, and now we're all participating in these IPOs. We're all participating in the market as opposed to a select few that participate.
What percent?
I'll have to do some research on that. What percentage?
Last thing I'll mention, because it's at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Norway has huge energy resources. Okay.
Yes.
All right. In addition to that, Norway is number one in the world in happiness. And now,
Number one, what?
in happiness of their
Happy.
Oh
people.
yeah, they're happy. Well,
In part because they're all worth 400K at a minimum.
I was going to
So
say.
I got one thing that you mentioned, like giving people the need to give people more control over their retirement savings. 10% of American males under age 30 have a gambling problem. So when they turn retirement age, I don't know, somebody's going to have to educate them about how not to blow their money on bullshit.
All I can say, it's a good business, Rick. That's all I can say. But with that, we also have to say we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker, former Comptroller General of the United States, and our panelists and our guests in the U.S. and, of course, around the world. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.